What's going on, Lecrae?
So how you doing? How we doing?
I'm good, man. We're going to highlight, I know Divine is going to highlight me and you to spotlight you and I so that we can do this conversation. Let me say this to everyone participating, especially to the Beulah Heights University students. Thank you for your continued journey. COVID-19 has created a new reality, not only for professors, but also for students. And it has been tough for many of the students to hang in there. I just want to say I'm very proud of you. I'm proud of you for your continued steadfastness while going through this pandemic, and also all of the transitions involved. I want to say this just to clarify. I'm not sure what happened to my camera before this meeting. My camera is doing something very funky. I do apologize for that, but we're going to move forward with this conversation regardless. Ladies and gentlemen, a man who really needs absolutely no introduction, but I will give him one for sake of protocol. We have with us Grammy Award winning. This guy has so many successes in business and in music. Not only is he a recording artist, he's a songwriter. He's also an executive, music executive, actor, best-selling author, co-founder and president of the nonprofit Reach Life Ministries. Does work all over the country and beyond. Has transformed, really, elements of hip hop that many thought could never be transformed. I'll give you a quick synopsis of that. For V103, I opened up for a lot of concerts. I'm opening up for T.I., I think at the Georgia World Congress Center. I'm doing his intro, but you know who's headlining as well? Lecrae. A Christian hip hop artist is on stage with a known gangster rap artist, and the kids who were at the concert were loving Lecrae. They love Lecrae everywhere. He has the top song on the Christian Billboard charts, and also a top album, and also a top song on the hip hop charts at the exact same time. Completely unheard of in this world. Now, without any additional hesitation, introducing the big homie, Lecrae.
Appreciate it.
How you doing, man?
Man, I'm hanging in there. You know what I mean? It's beautiful weather outside. And unfortunately, sometimes you got to be inside, but it's all good.
Yeah, it is beautiful outside. At Leadership Talks, we get into your personal life and we connect it to the professional. These conversations allow students, allow community members to glean from your wisdom, your ups, your downs, your transparency. Lecrae, you are one of the most transparent artists in the game, and I think your authenticity has translated to a degree that really penetrates the soul of those who listen to your music. Let's talk about your new book. You have a new book out, and your book, once again, very transparent. What's in your book?
Oh man, the book is, my journey. It's my journey as an individual who had to recognize that, I dealt with some historical trauma that has caused me problems and pain and desires for acceptance. It's my journey through racial chaos. It's my journey through marital chaos. It's my journey through political and religious chaos, and how I've had to find hope within in the chaos, and how other people can find it as well.
Your book is called How I Lost My Religion, but Found My Faith.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a sermon in itself. How I Lost My Religion and Found My Faith. Tell us the background to the title of your book.
Yeah, well, in our culture, religion is this idea of following rules, but unfortunately, it's following rules for the sake of gaining acceptance. Whereas faith or relationship is about understanding you're already accepted, and so your actions are, in light of you already being accepted. So, faith for me is understanding that it's not about me following all the rules that allows me to gain acceptance from either God or human beings, but it's understanding I'm already intrinsically valuable and have purpose and worth, and so I don't need to earn acceptance or earn love.
How did you come to that realization in your Christian walk? Because you have been a Christian very publicly, right? And it's a little different when you're a public Christian and people know
Right.
you as a public Christian. How did you come to this realization that it wasn't about these rules and regulations, that it was about you being authentic to who God made you?
Um, I kind of got pushed into a corner. You know, when you get pushed into a corner and everyone is telling you to be who they want you to be, initially, you know, it's you find yourself doing it, but then you get to a place where you're like, this is not healthy, and I don't like this. I have to suffocate an aspect of who I am in order to be accepted, and I think once you realize that, um, you start clawing for freedom and clawing for opportunities to be your most authentic self. And when my authentic self was being rejected, it left me really disillusioned. And so I knew that something was wrong, and I had to fight to to live in a healthy space.
Let's talk about the authentic you. In this book, you reveal a lot of things. Let's talk about some of those deep areas that you talk about, and how that has helped you transition more so into the authentic self.
Yeah, I mean, I walk people through a lot of the trials and tribulations that I had to endure in order to come to my most authentic version of myself. I walk people through, climbing all the ladders of success and learning that they were leaning on the wrong building, and so you get to a place where you achieve everything that you never imagined you'd achieve, but it doesn't add any value to you as a person. It doesn't make the pain go away. It doesn't keep your mother alive a day longer, and you find out that you've just been doing all these things to impress these people that that never really mattered, and that weren't people who really cared about you. You were objectified, and you know at the end of the day, they wanted an aspect of you, but not the fullness of you.
Mm.
And so when you get tired of that, you find out that you're most healthy when you can be, the most authentic version of yourself. And a lot of people do get to be their authentic selves, but when you are a public figure, you have to be on and manicure it all the time. And I think we actually are drawn to people who show their humanity from a public stage. Those are the most appealing people to us sometimes. Why we love comedians, because they seem to be telling on themselves. And I think that's what I had to do, is just deal with the backlash that will come with being honest and authentic, and allow those people who love me for me to move forward.
Lecrae, I'm like you in that I work a lot of jobs. It's a 7-day a week schedule from radio to television, rolling out magazine, being a professor. And so the number one question I get is, how do you do it all without having some kind of avenue, right? And typically they mean, do you drink? Do you smoke? What's your vice, right? And I've learned over time that being your authentic self is therapeutic, period. Being your authentic self has a level of therapy that many people don't realize until they get into it.
Mhm. I totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Your album, Restoration. Let's talk about Restoration. Tremendously successful. You're already one of the biggest artists, period, in America and beyond. You have shattered what we understand as Christian hip hop. Okay. Um, my dean, Dr. Jackson, who holds a doctorate of psychology, right? He didn't want to know. He said, Rashad, I need you to ask this question for me. He didn't want to know how the industry has treated you. He wanted to know how church folks have treated you.
Mm.
What has that atmosphere been like? You being what some would call a gospel artist who mingles with secularism. What has
Mhm.
that conversation been like in the Christian
Yeah, I mean, it's been difficult to say the least.
church?
You know, people, unfortunately, I mean, church people are like any other people. We don't really like nuance. We don't really like gray areas. we don't like to think about complex things. We like things very simple. It's why when you go to a fast food restaurant, you order the number two. You don't want to have to say, I want it like this and I want this. And you just, here's my categories, give them to me the way I like it. I just don't want to think right now. And there's just some areas in life where we can't afford to not think. And I think that faith is one of them. And so I was constantly pressing upon, the church to think about certain things. When I'm doing songs with people, you know, it's not just a black and white category. It's not, oh, you can't do that. Why? Because you're Christian. Well, where does it say I can't do a song with this person because they're not a Christian? Well, you don't be unevenly yoked. Well, that's actually not applicable to this situation. That's about another situation. So I don't, help me understand. Well, it's wrong. And basically what they're saying is, I don't want to think about why I believe what I believe. I just know I want a number two, no pickles. And so, it was difficult because I'm trying to help them process this in a much more thoughtful way. And me saying, well, don't, if I go to work every day and I work with non-Christians, what's the difference? And I think the main problem is oftentimes we see these Christian artists as we put them on a plateau or the platform of a pastor, and we're thinking that they're giving their pulpit over to somebody who's going to say something crazy, and that's really not the case. It's what it is it's an artistic collaboration where I'm not just freely saying say whatever you want to say, but it's very much so thought out. And anyway, long story short, the church had a problem with it, and people would do everything from protest me to send me hate mail, show up at the concerts just to create problems, and so it was wild.
How did that make you feel?
Oh, it disturbed me to my core because you got to remember, I'm somebody who didn't come from the church. I came from outside of the church, and here I am trying to come in and use my gifts for God, and everyone's like, oh yeah, we'll take that. But when I go back to the very people that I came from to walk alongside of them, I was frowned upon, and so I thought this was my new family. Why is my new family looking upon me with such disdain? And so it hurt to the core.
Have you seen a grace or a lessening of the judgment since you have continued in this vein and been very successful for many years?
Yeah, I think one thing I always say is that the purge comes before the surge. So you're purging all of the naysayers and the protractors and the people who just are against you, and they'll hang around for a while, and then they'll dissipate. And then the surge are the people who say, oh, you're really consistent at this vantage point and this view. I like you, and you're a voice for me. And then they rally around you. And so I think what I've seen happen is people have said, I'm moving away. This guy's is unfaithful. And then they saw the consistency and they saw the fruit and the character, and some of them said, all right, maybe I was wrong, let me come back around. And they've been apologetic. But yeah, I mean, overall, the people who were gracious to me initially. It wasn't them coming back.
Buell University is a premier leadership institution. So we study and teach the psychology of leadership, the practical implementation of leadership. And I think leadership is one of the most underrated dynamics of a leader, right? We talk about supervisors and CEOs. A person who has leadership capacity, we don't put as much emphasis on it as we should. Leadership means that you're willing to not only take a stance, but you're willing to take an unpopular stance if necessary. In your leadership approach, you are taking a stance that empowers and leads also young secular people. At the concerts I've been on stage with you at, the crowd, these are crowds that never would have heard Jesus that day or probably that year, but they celebrate your music. How has that empowered you as a leader an anomaly in Christian hip hop?
Yeah, what that's done for me is just allow me to realize that if I exist, then people like me exist, and so those people need a voice and need to realize that they're not alone. I think in some senses, I needed to see a King David. I needed to see somebody who was flawed and broken and didn't have it all figured out, but still had to lead. I needed to, when you look, I mentioned this in a book. When you look through the Bible, the priests have very specific rules and regulations and mandates on them as spiritual leaders. But when you look at the kings and the queens, there's nothing there for them. There's no like, well, in order to be a king, you must do this, 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 and this. It's a little more fluid, and so they've got to be a lot more dependent and figuring and diligent and vigilant about figuring out what it means to be a leader in that capacity. And so that's how I feel. I feel like I've had to learn on the fly how to be a leader and what that dynamic looks like.
The Bible is full of transformational and transactional leaders, right? But one thing about transformational leaders in scripture is that even though we know them today as transformative leaders, these leaders were very flawed and they had some real issues. And it was important in the text, in the scripture, to make sure we were aware that these men and women were very much human. And it seems as if, to your point, what has happened is that Christian folk, we have now decided that our leaders must have a form of perfection not even illustrated in the Bible. Talk to that.
No, I mean, you nailed it. I think that's part of the issue is there's, you look at the genealogy in Matthew, and I don't think it's ironic or coincidental that it's found in Matthew that Rahab makes that genealogy. I think Matthew needed to see a Rahab and the like in that genealogy because he needed to see that somebody like himself could play a role in the greatest story ever told. How could this prostitute be a part of the lineage of bringing forth the Messiah, the Savior of the world? Well, if she can be a part of this, then me, who's a tax collector, who's one of the most despised individuals in all of Judaism, can have something to do in this grand narrative as well. And I think that's what all leaders should look at. I find encouragement looking at Abraham, that God decides to use Abraham of all people to be the patriarch of his people, to say, hey, you are the representative of my people. And this is a man who, didn't have enough patience to wait to be with his wife, to, have the child that is promised to birth the entire nation of Israel. So, these are flawed individuals, and there's no perfect individuals outside of Jesus in the scriptures. And I think that we should take note of that and not try to, obviously we hold leaders to a standard, but we should also recognize and realize that they're human as well, and that they need the same grace that we would all expect of God.
You quoted one of the most powerful leadership quotes I've ever heard. And I've mentioned this on my radio show before, and I'm going to read it to you because I want you to unpack it in your own words. You said, and I quote, "There were no Martin Luther Kings or Malcolm X's. They had all passed away. So I had Tupac." Unpack that.
Yeah, I mean, when you are growing up in an environment where there's such a generational gap, you got to remember that my mother, who was fed by the Black Panthers, when most of them were killed, or on the run from the FBI. And so you have a generation of young people who are looking at Dr. King and looking at the Panthers, and they don't have all of the educational prowess that they would have needed, because those leaders weren't around long enough to, pass that along. Um, and so they're doing the best they can, piecemealing it together. And that's where you get the birth of street gangs like the Bloods and Crips. These were not started to wreak havoc on communities. These were started to protect communities. They just did not have all the intellectual and cultural know-how that their predecessors had, but the predecessors didn't get to pass it on because they were either imprisoned or killed. And so these individuals, who had some of the understanding of a king and some of the understanding of of the Panthers, but yet still had to formulate some of their own views based off of the streets and their abandonment, were the only leaders that we had. And these were leaders like Tupac Shakur, whose mother was a Black Panther, who was imprisoned. And, he had to take what he knew from his own experiences. And so I didn't have anybody who was articulating what it meant to grow up in a fatherless house in music and art. I didn't have anybody who could articulate what it was like to grow up in a crime-ridden community, or to visit somebody in prison when you're a kid. Where do you go to have people to relate to on that level? Now in 2020, sure, there's plenty of movies and documentaries and interviews, but there was none of that when I was a kid. And so Tupac was the voice that I had to listen to.
Let's talk about your upbringing. A lot of how you were raised has contributed to who you are as a person, the experiences that you've had. Let's talk about Lecrae as a young man and what that Lecrae experienced and how those experiences have shaped today your worldview.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm a person who, I would say has range. And so a lot of people can misconstrue range, um, you know, for trying to fit you into a box. And when I say range, I mean that I've had so many experiences, and there's so many facets to who I am, that it'd be very difficult to compartmentalize me. So you may sit and listen to me talk and say, oh, he can talk about this, or he has exposure to this. And you may, if I only want to show you one aspect of myself, the corporate side of me, so to speak, you many people will be just fine with that. But I did, grow up in an urban context. I was influenced by gang members. My father was in and out of prison, um, and so those experiences shaped me as well. A lot of my friends were incarcerated, or killed, and so that shaped my vantage point and my perspective as well. And so some of those things are things that I can't unsee. I have experienced issues with, abuse and police brutality and social injustice. And yet I've lived in the throes of evangelicalism. I've gone to college, and I have, uh, traveled the world. And so I can't peel off those different layers of who I am. They've all made me the person that I am today, and they inform each other. They talk to each other, so that when I'm speaking to, a police officer who may be a good friend of mine, and we're having a conversation, I can speak from an informed perspective of what it was like when I had a terrible experience with the police, and not just say, well, he's good, so it's all good, and not say, well, that was bad, so he's bad. But these two sides, facets of myself can communicate and be well informed.
You've been very active. I told you this on air a few days ago when you were with us protesting. We didn't run into you, but the fact that you were out there in Atlanta protesting, that information just went through the crowd like wildfire. That Lecrae is here, and we're talking about cats from the hood. You came to one of the protests where you had a lot of locals who were frustrated. Let me put it that way, right? And they said it with a sense of pride that Lecrae was somewhere around here. Um, you and I both are part of an organization called Breaking Into Business, where we fund young entrepreneurs. Um, we're working on something with the Department of Juvenile Justice. You go around to jails and prisons and you bless them with your word, with your music, with protective gear. I mean, you're literally paying for protective gear during COVID-19 when it should be a function of the tax dollars of that community. You're coming in and you're paying for it. And you're doing so much more. You do more than what I call the average do-gooder. All right. What drives you with your schedule to continue giving back to the community the way you do?
Oh man, I just realized that I'm not here by happenstance. I realized that there was a lot of roads paved for me and shoulders that I stand upon. Without the efforts of a Dr. King, without the efforts of Andrew Young, I don't get to do the things that I'm doing. And so, far be it from me to assume that I paved my own way and I'm the, that no one had any contributions to allow me to the freedoms that I get to experience today. So I want to make sure that I'm doing the same thing. I want to make sure that in a, in a real way, that my ceiling can be the floor for someone else, for another generation, that those roads can be paved and they can be a little bit easier for them than they were for me. Because I do realize that, that just because I've overcome a lot of the hurdles, both socially and economically, that there's many others who haven't. Mentally and emotionally, there's many others who haven't. And so I just always want to make sure that I have my eyes on them and creating opportunities for them.
One thing about leadership that can never be learned in the academic context, it must simply be experienced, is overcoming a controversy. Okay. The most recent one, when you were part of a discussion about white privilege, and one of the Christian evangelical leaders basically said, hey, white people get offended when you say white privilege. Let's call it white blessings, right? And you didn't co-sign on it, but you did not create an adversarial argument in that moment. And you were criticized on social media. You and I have talked about it directly. I'm personally satisfied with your response. And then you had to make some public responses to it. I want you to tell us, how did that controversy affect you? And as a leader, what was your, I don't want to say strategy because I know your response came from the heart, but what was your feeling that you needed to do in order to respond to this controversy that had been created from that conversation?
Yeah, I think everyone's knee-jerk reaction is to be defensive. And I think that is that kind of demonstrates a lack of humility, right? If you're immediately defensive, that means you're not willing to listen and learn. You just want to plead your case. And I think leadership requires listening. It requires desiring to actually be better, not just do better, right? So I can do better. Next time I won't do this. But what kind of person will I be in light of everything that's being stirred up? And I wanted to be better. So part of being better is listening to the voices. Okay, obviously there were some of them that were a little unfair, a little too critical, but that's okay. They're expressing their emotions, and let me hear what they have to say. And in hearing what people had to say, I learned, and it taught me. It taught me that even if I disagree with someone, or when I disagree with someone, that I should always consider the people in the room that I represent and the people in the room that have the most to lose. And so what I didn't do in that moment was consider the people in the room that had the most to lose. I was being a little too cordial, a little too calm, because I'm thinking about it as if we're just having a dialogue and a conversation, and I can address this afterward. Even though I'm shocked by what's being said, I'm thinking to myself, oh, wow, what do we do here? Part of being a leader is learning, like, you're not going to deal with everything right, especially when you're on the spot. And if you're going to call shots, you're going to take shots. So shots come with the idea of leadership. But it's also the humility in saying, let me learn, let me listen to people, and then let me come back and acknowledge that I hear you, I'm listening and I'm learning and I want to be better. I don't just want to do better. I don't want to look the part. I want to be the part. And I think that's how it affected me.
You know, I appreciated the way you responded to that whole matter because it came from a place of authenticity. When you said, I should have remembered the people I was there to represent. You didn't defend, hey, here's why. You didn't say, well, here's what the pastor meant. And these people are your friends. So it's you know that's another level of leadership. How do I say what I need to say when I know that it may seem as if I'm offending somebody I have friendship with or respect for, right? And you came out and you were very transparent about your mental process at the moment. And because of your transparency and because of your heart, you, I mean, you eliminated virtually all of the controversy just based on how you responded. And what it tells me is that a lot of people, when things like that happen, and yes, you got criticized, but people were just really looking for a genuine response to it. And you gave them a genuine response, and it satisfied the vast majority of people who were critical. I say something often, Lecrae. I tell students, criticism is the price you pay for leadership. And the day you are unwilling to pay that price is the day you're unfit to lead anybody. And the way you put it, I loved it too. You said if you call shots, you got to take them. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. And again, it's now obviously, you know, those are two leaders, and there's a cordial relationship. We weren't like intricate friends that we talk on the phone or anything like that. But I think that's another aspect of leadership as well, is that you're going to encounter so many people and in so many different circles, and just understanding the dynamics of those relationships, right? Because especially in leadership, there's going to be plenty of people who assume that you two are best friends because they listen to you, they consume all the information that you say, and you're present. And you're going to have to stand your ground and be your authentic self, and then see if they're still willing to hang out, still willing to be present, still willing to
take your phone call.
Exactly. Yeah.
I want to go to Q&A to the audience, Lecrae. Before I do that, I always ask a series of gut check questions. These are real simple, direct questions that warrant a direct response. What's your favorite color?
Red. Right off the
What's your
rip.
favorite movie?
Oh man, probably The Matrix.
What's your favorite song?
Favorite song?
It's always tough for artists to answer that question.
No, I think my favorite song is Zion by Lauryn Hill. Yeah.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
Who's your hero?
Oh man. That's a tough one. Sheesh. I mean, outside of Tupac, Tupac is definitely one of my heroes. Outside of Tupac, I would have to say Angela Davis. Yeah.
Biggest regret?
Oof. Biggest regret. Probably not going to therapy earlier in life. Mm-hmm.
Most cherished success?
Most cherished success. I think honestly it's being a consistent father.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to go back to your biggest regret for a moment. Because you said something powerful, not going to counseling or to therapy sooner. I share this often. I started going to counseling when I was 27. I'm 39 today. At 27 is the first day I started to become a man. I did not start becoming a man until I was 37. And here's why. At that time, I was under no court order. Nobody told me I had to go to counseling. I was a foster kid with a lot of hangups about life, you know, and I carried that with me for a long time. And it expressed itself in different ways. I hurt people that love me, right? So at 27, I said, you know what? I got to stop doing this to people that care about me. I have to stop treating them this way. And what I realized in counseling is that what I was attempting to do is end the relationship on my own terms because I had been accustomed or indoctrinated to others ending the relationship on their terms. Went through 5 foster homes, and you know it was the same hurt every time. So at 27, I did something new. I acknowledged that I was damaged, right? And you can't change what you fail to acknowledge. And I believe therapy is such a big step about being a responsible man that I encourage everyone around me, especially if you're Black. If you Black, you need to see a counselor. And I'm not saying it's not for everybody, but especially if you are Black in America, you need to talk to somebody. But it was that day that started my journey to manhood and full responsibility. Let's go to the audience. Destiny, I'm sorry, Divine. I'm not sure exactly how we want to do the Q&A, but let's go ahead and start it. If people can either raise their hand in the chat. I'm not able to see everybody. Destiny, if you can see everybody, you can call on them. They can raise their hands. However we can get these questions out, let's do it.
I do want to say, first of all,
yes,
just to everybody, you know, just to all the students here at Bela Heights, like you guys are, you know, remarkable students in a remarkable time. And it's crazy out here right now, but I just want to encourage you all not to quit, not to give up. This is great that you all are investing in yourselves in this way.
Awesome. Thank you, Lecrae.
Yeah.
All right, Divine, who we got? Anybody with a question or comment for the one and only Lecrae?
Okay, there are no questions so far. Anybody has?
I think they can put them in the chat, maybe.
They can put it in the chat, yes.
They scared to talk,
Okay,
man. They nervous around you, brother.
That's all good.
All right, we have one question.
Yeah.
Oh, hi. My name is Isaac. I had a question to ask you about. So when you first started making music, like I know it might have been really hard because you're just like a nobody in the music industry and going to somebody. But I just want to know how you were able to use the gift God gave you into making it into a successful life. Because I mean, I make my own songs as well. I'm starting to make my own songs, write, compose, and I just wanted to see what kind of advice you could give.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man, for the question. I would just say, honestly, man, create. You know, a lot of times we create music because we think that the world has to hear this instead of creating music because it needs to be created. And I tell my daughter that, you know, my daughter wants to be, is very extremely creative, but sometimes she gets overoccupied or preoccupied with wanting the platform and for the world to hear it, and not realizing that, you know, if you're creating something to inspire people, you know, all it takes is one person to be inspired, and you've done a great job. That'll expand, and you'll learn how to grow at your craft as you do it for that reason alone. And so for me, it was the prison system where I started performing because I saw it was inspiring to them, and it taught me how to write better songs, and it taught me how to connect with people on a different level. I wasn't trying to go straight from my bedroom to the award show. I was, you know, taking it step by step. I would go to the projects and knock on doors and say, I'm doing a free concert in the park if anybody wants to come. And it'd just be a bunch of kids from the projects who would show up and listen to me rap. you know, and so, but it was teaching me a lesson. You know, I would go to the YMCA after school programs, and I'll just say, man, y'all want to check me out? I'm doing, do a couple songs for y'all. And when you got them, you got them. And when you don't, you don't. But you learn to just create, and hopefully it inspires somebody.
We have a question from the chat. What do you view as the 3 most pressing issues facing young people today, and why?
Oh man, I think identity. You know what I mean? I think we live in a very narcissistic society, and so your identity is being shaped and being formed in ways outside of your control every day. And so you have all the issues of anxiety, depression. You have the issues of getting caught up in things that just are not beneficial to you, your well-being, because you don't know who you are. You're allowing outside sources and forces to tell you who you are. As a Christian, I know that I am made in the image of God. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made, and I don't have to be who anybody else wants me to be. I just have to be who God created me to be. But if I don't know that, they're gonna have a field day with me on in this world. So social media is telling you who you are, and if you don't have this, then you're nobody, and if you don't have that, then you're nobody. And so I think identity is a huge piece. You gotta be able to know exactly who you are without the influence of the outside world and their opinions.
You said something very powerful. There's a sociologist who made a statement about our hyper-connected world today, social media and everything else. And he said, and I quote, "We are either agents 24 hours in a day. We are either agents of social influence or targets of social influence." And that is the daily existence of virtually every human being. We're either agents of social influence or we're targets of social influence. So we have to disconnect sometimes. Do we have another question in the audience?
Yes, we do. Megan Johnson.
Megan, go ahead.
Hey, I'm a pastor at a church in Atlanta. I'm in Dr. Richey's class on Friday nights on Martin Luther King and the church. And I'm struck by your story, Lecrae, in the church and the pain that the church inflicted on you. And I'm sorry for that. But I wonder what your word is for the church to be relevant today. We're a church that's in Midtown Atlanta. We're on the corner of Peachtree and North Avenue. We're right in the heart of things. If we want to be relevant, what's your word for us?
Great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Honestly, I think it's recognizing. It's funny when you send people on foreign missions, they take their time, they build relationships, they ask questions, they understand the culture. For whatever reason, when it comes to America, we just tend to think we've got it figured out, and people should come play on our soil and play by our rules. And I think the same tenderness, patience that we exhibit when we leave this country and go to others, we should exhibit in our own backyard. And so it's a matter of asking not just asking questions, but developing friendships and relationships so that you can understand. I think we struggle here because the church struggles in America because we think we already understand. We don't realize things are ever changing, and we just think we've got it already figured out. And I'll never forget, Joe Circumer was his name. He was a campus pastor from Kentucky. And he said, "Lecrae, I don't know much about you, but tonight, let's watch all your favorite movies." And I was like, "What?" I was like, "You want to watch Boys in the Hood? You want to watch Menace to Society with me?" And he was like, "Whatever you want to watch, I want to watch it with you, man. And I want to know why these are your favorites." And he really did a great job of just trying to know me and understand my world instead of trying to like take what he knew and place it on top of me. He wanted to speak to where I was coming from and my experiences. And I think that's what it means to be, the truth is always relevant, right? It's always relevant. You don't have to make truth relevant, but you have to make it relational. And I think that's what we need to do, is to find ourselves in relationships with people.
You know, there's a saying that goes, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Mhm.
Yeah. Who
We
else
have
we got?
another question, Mr. Cameron Doyle.
Mr. Doyle, go ahead.
Once again, hi, my name is Cameron Doyle, and I was just wondering, like, how did you get signed by Reach Records, and how did you, like, what were you feeling when they signed you?
Well, it wasn't much of a label at the time. It was just my buddy Ben and his idea. And so, we both had this brilliant idea to start this record label, and here we are today. So I was actually, that's a good question though, because I was just as excited as if I signed a multi-million-dollar contract when all I signed for was the ability to record in the studio. That was it. But I was just as excited, and that's what you need. You need that thrill, that idealism, and excitement.
Griffin writes in the chat, what was your number one struggle when first starting off in music? Also, big fan, keep up the good work. So what was your number one struggle?
My number one struggle when starting off in music was probably just understanding the business of music, because it is a business, so I love the creative aspect of it, but it's kind of like school. You don't want to do the work. You want recess. And so you realize, oh, I'm not just here for recess. Like, I actually got to learn how to do the stuff that they want me to do in this building. And that's a part of it, is that you're not just there to be creative. There's a whole business around it.
Divine, we have any other questions from the audience?
No questions.
All right. Speak now, Bevel, hold your peace. We got a few minutes with Lecrae. Also, I want to remind people, go to the chat. Jackie O has posted. We're so thankful for Buell and all the students' amazing questions. Inviting you to join in on Lecrae's live this evening at 6 p.m. Tell everyone what's going down today at 6 p.m.
I'll just be answering a lot of questions. You get a huge Q&A and a little devotional on Twitch today. So, if you're familiar with Twitch, which I'm sure some of the younger ones are, I'll be there answering questions.
All right, if you're not familiar, you can go ahead and download it now and get up on that thing to make sure you can continue to hear from Lecrae. We're coming to our closing. I know you have to transition to 6 p.m. Let me just ask you this question before you go. What would you say to those who are Christian leaders, but they have a radical idea, kind of like you, and they know that where they're planted right now, their idea would not receive the support and encouragement needed? What would you say to them?
Oh, I would say don't nobody knows that but God. So don't listen to anybody tell you that it's not going to work. You should listen to constructive criticism. Always listen to constructive criticism, not destructive criticism. If someone's telling you that's not going to work, it's not going to do this, that's more destructive. Someone's telling you it could work if, or have you thought about this, or that's more constructive, and be attentive to that. I think that's helpful.
To everyone here, and to those who review this on YouTube later, Lecrae, I want to make sure people know how to get your album, how to download your album, and also how to get your book. This is going to be your, I think, second best-selling book.
Yeah, you can get the book, the album, all of that at lecrae.com, just lecrae.com. It's got everything you would ever need, and I appreciate all the love and the support.
Lecrae, we thank you at Buell Heights University Leadership and Business Department. We are forever grateful for leaders like you who continue to blaze the trail. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. God bless.